Mr. President, I also would like to take a few minutes to speak on another topic, the extension of unemployment benefits and COBRA subsidies. You know, I admire those in this body who take principled stands. The Senate would get more done if all members were guided by their basic core principles and put principles ahead of political posturing, ahead of party, ahead of polling. To block a legislative measure because it's not fully offset, sure, that could be based on principle. And believe me, I am concerned about our budget deficit. But principles are something that you consistently stand behind. It's what makes it a principle. Something you care about, something that guides you throughout your career. It makes it a principle. And principles can't be ignored, even when it's expedient or advantageous to do so. And yet, that's exactly what's happening now. The principle is being invoked only now that it's convenient. You might remember that when George W. Bush entered office, it was with a $200 billion budget surplus. He also entered office with projections of nearly $1 billion in future surpluses over the next decade and a glide path to paying off the entire national debt. But instead of doing the sensible thing and paying down our debt when we had the means, the Bush administration racked up massive deficits at a record pace. Vice President Cheney even said that deficits don't matter. And Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan testified that we might pay off our debt just too quickly. We were told that we might have too much money. Really, he did this. He testified to Congress saying that was a real worry. Then we paid for an unnecessary war in Iraq without offsets. We passed Medicare Part D without offsets. We passed 3 different sets of tax cuts totaling trillions of dollars, most benefiting the wealthiest people in the nation, without offsets. Yet last Thursday night, the Senate repeatedly attempted to extend benefits for America's unemployed workers. And these efforts were blocked, supposedly because it wasn't fully offset. Now, for some reason, benefits to the wealthiest Americans, they didn't need to be offset. But keeping unemployment benefits flowing to those families who have been hardest hit by this recession, now suddenly they need an offset. If this is a matter of principle, it seems to me to be a very, very bizarre principle. One principle we should all stand behind is supporting American families when economic times are tough. Last week, 500,000 Americans applied for unemployment benefits for the first time. Despite what some might suggest, our nation's unemployment crisis is not over. We know that unemployment can persist long after a recovery begins. This downturn will continue affecting American families for months and years to come. That is why we need to extend federal unemployment benefits now. Without an extension, over 1 million Americans, including thousands of Minnesotans, will lose their benefits this month. Without those unemployment benefits, many families will have no other way to keep paying their mortgage and buying groceries. Even with some economic progress, there are still six applicants for every job opening. In some industries, there are simply no jobs to be found. Our obligation to America's working families is a serious one. When there are jobs to be had, working and middle-class families keep our economy running. After Wall Street's indiscretions were the cause of an economic collapse and our government bailed them out, we're in no place to tell America's families that there isn't enough to help to go around. Their interests should have been placed ahead of the big banks from the start. Further, the provisions that are currently being blocked will also provide for the vital COBRA subsidy. Right now, the COBRA subsidy is helping American families retain their health care coverage while they continue to look for work. Facing a medical crisis while being unemployed and uninsured is a burden most families simply cannot withstand. We should not be putting Americans in that position when it's due to no fault of their own. We should not be driving them to a place where they simply have run out of options. This procedural stalling is unacceptable. I've heard from Minnesota's employment commissioner that the expiration and subsequent agreement on an extension will be an administrative burden on our state, not to mention an inefficient use of state resources. The delays are also stressful and disruptive for Minnesota's families. This is the case in all 50 of our states. So I call on all of my colleagues to come together today and stand behind the principle of supporting American families when times are tough. This is the principle on which we should all be focused and all be judged. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.